Okay, welcome back to COSC 1436, C++. This video will be on chapter 5, specifically on using counters and using while loops. I'm going to share my screen. And there'll be other parts that will go over other loops from the same chapter. Okay, so starting with chapter 5, it's going to cover loops and files. And we first start looking at something that is used in loops, which is called an increment and a decrement operator. So you'll see several slides over this. And the importance of this is to really understand how it works so that when you use it with your loops, you're using it correctly. So we've looked at this before where we've seen how we can have a shortcut to saying val equals val plus 1. So we can say val plus plus is the same thing as this. So it's a shortcut to this statement. And this is called an increment because we're incrementing this variable called value. We're incrementing it by 1. So the plus plus can be put after the variable, or it can be used before the variable. In either case, if you use it as a single statement, it's just val plus plus semicolon or plus plus val semicolon, it's going to yield the same value. It's going to increment your variable and then assign it and store it back into this variable called val. We can do the same thing with the decrement operator. So if you want to subtract 1 from your variable and assign it back to the variable, you can say val minus minus or minus minus val. Remember, val is just a variable. And you can use any variable. It could be x minus minus or minus minus x or any variable you choose. You do have to define your variable as an integer because you're assigning an integer to it. And you're incrementing it, decrementing it by an integer. Okay, so here's an example of using the increment and the decrement operator. So let's say that we have this variable called num, and it starts with a 4. Here we output the 4. We say the variable num is 4. Okay, and then it outputs, I will now increment num. So here we increment num by 1. So now num is 5, and it outputs a 5. Now we increment again. So now we're at 6. It outputs a 6. Now we decrement. So we subtract 1 from 6. We're at 5. We subtract 1 again, and we're back at 4. So the output of this program would say the variable num is 4. I will now increment num 5, increment to 6, decrement to 5, and then decrement to 4. Now, the plus plus and the minus minus operators can be used in complex statements and expressions. So if we use it in complex statements and expressions, let's take a look at this, what it says. The prefix mode, so plus plus val and minus minus val, the operator increments or decrements, then it returns the value of the variable. So first it increments, so let's say we're at 3, so it would go up to 4, and then it's going to return the 4. Here, it returns the value first, so value is a 3, returns the 3 first, then it goes up to 4. This is really important when you use it in more complex statements and expressions. It doesn't matter in this instance up here because all you're doing is minus minus num, and then you're displaying it. So it has decreased the number, and then we display it. But let's take a look at these examples. This is really important to understand. So here, if the value is 12, the variable val is 12, it first displays the 12, and then it increments to 13. So it does it in that order that you're seeing it. So first you'll see 12, but what's really stored is going to be a 13. Okay, so now let's say we're at 13. So val is 13. If we do this, then we increment from 13 to 14. So now we're going to go up to 14, and we're going to now see and display that 14 on the screen. So it displays the 14. Now here, num is an integer. We're going to take the 14. We're going to subtract 1 from 14. So we're at 13. And then that 13 gets assigned to num. So now we're at 13. So here, 13 gets assigned to num. And then we decrease it to 12. And it sets val to 12. So val is 12. This gets set to 12, but num does not get set to 12. Num stays at a 13. So val here, up here was 13, gets assigned to 13, and then val gets decreased to 12. So make sure you understand how this works when you're doing assignment statements or output statements, because it can cause something that you were not expecting it to happen. Make sure you understand it really well. So a few notes on your increment and decrement operators. They can be used in expressions. We just saw that. So we can say num1. So here we increment, and then we add the decrement value. So we can do this. It has to be applied to something, meaning like you see how the plus is applied here to the variable? Well, this is not applied to any variable because there's two variables here. So this is not allowed. We cannot do this. We can use it with relational expressions. So this can happen here. So here what would happen is we would increase num by 1, and then num would actually get assigned that value, and then we would compare it and see if it's greater than the limit. All right, so all that, we show all that because we use the increment and decrement operators in our loops. There are 3 different loops that we're going to cover. In this video, I'm going to stop at the while loop, okay? And then the next one we'll cover the next loop. So, first of all, what is a loop and why is it important? So if you think about any program, just think of any program you've ever used. It probably, most likely, I would say 100% likely has a loop. So, for example, if you have to enter any kind of data on anything, and it has to make sure that your data is valid, it's going to use a loop to make sure that your data is valid. For example, if you have to enter a username and password, it's going to keep asking for that until it's valid, or you've reached an X number of entries. Maybe you can't enter it more than 3 times. That is all a loop. That's all counting. Like, did you enter it more than 3 times? And I need you to stop trying. I'm going to lock you out. Definitely we have loops in games. There's lots of loops in gaming. And so we could definitely program something without a loop, but it would be if you have the same code and you repeat the same code, you see that you're repeating the same code, exactly the same, then use a loop because it will make your program smaller and easier to read and there'll be less errors. So don't ever just copy and paste the same code that you want to repeat. Make sure you use a loop. So here's the format for using your while loop. You have the word while. So this is a keyword, has to be lowercase. You have an open and a closed parentheses, and inside your open and closed parentheses, just like your if statement, your conditional statement that we talked about last chapter, it's going to have your expression. So your expression here would be something that would result in a false or a true. And the way that this works is while the expression inside is true, while it's a true statement, it will repeat this statement that you have right under the while loop. Now you can also have here, it says you can also have a block. So you can have an open and curly brace, and then you could have more than one statement repeat. So you'll see that in just a second. So just like I said, if it's true, it goes into the statement. If it's false, then it will skip this statement and will not execute that statement. So here's the logic of our while loop. We enter the expression, we check to see the expression is true. If the expression is true, then we just keep looping. True, do this, go back up, check again. Is it true? Yes. Do the statements or statements again. And then once you reach a false, then you're going to exit. So here's one example of a while loop. We have number equals 1. So this is our variable. It's an integer. We're going to check to see if number, our variable, is less than or equal to 5. If it's less than or equal to 5, then we're going to print or output the word hello. And then we're going to increase our variable by 1. So number plus plus increases by 1. We go back up and we check. So let's go through this. So first of all, number is set to 1. So we're at 1 and we're going to check, is 1 less than or equal to 5? Yes, 1 is less than or equal to 5. So go ahead and output hello. Let me see if, let me annotate this real quick so you can see. Yeah. Okay, so number, so first I'm going to have number here. I'm just going to use the variable n for number. I don't have to write it all in. And then this is what's going to output over here. So this is our output. So when num is 1, it outputs hello. Okay. So it outputs hello, then it increases num to 2. So now num is 2 right here. We go back up and we say, is 2 less than or equal to 5? It is less than 5. So we're going to output hello again. Now num is incremented to, incremented to 3. We go back up here. Is 3 less than or equal to 5? It is less than or equal to 5. So we print hello again. Hello. We increment to 4. 4. We check, is 4 less than or equal to 5? Yes, it is. So we print hello. Now we increment to 5. Is 5 less than or equal to 5? Yes. So this is the 5th. This is number. Number has a 5 now. Doesn't print 5. It just prints hello. Now number gets incremented to 6. Now we're at 6. This variable number is 6. And it goes up here and it says, is 6 less than or equal to 5? Well, 6 is not less than 5. 6 is not equal to 5. So it exits and it outputs That's all. That's all. Okay. So n, or number here, has to get all the way to something that will make it false. So when this loop ends, this variable number here will have a value of 6, not of 5, but of 6, because it's gotta stop. Okay, now let's see if I can remember how to clear it. Undo, clear. Okay. So here's the output. It outputs hello 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and then it outputs that's all. So take some time, maybe enter that if you're not sure how that works. Enter it and then see how it works. Check it out. Okay, so, oh goodness. Give me just a second. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So here we have, this shows you basically the steps that I just went through. So I'm going to skip through here, but basically saying you will test the expression. If the expression is true, it does these. And then after this is false, it will exit. And so here's our flow chart. So we would put the condition here, the expression is number less than 5. It should say less than or equal to 5. If it's true, print hello, add 1 to the number, go back up, and keep repeating until this is false. So this just needs a little equal sign right there, because we do want to keep, we want to print hello if it's equal to 5. Okay, the while loop is called a pretest loop, which means that we're going to test the expression before we enter the loop. So that's why it's called pretest. So we test first. If it's true, we enter the loop. If it's not true, then we never enter the loop. So it could be that you just never enter the loop. Like, for example, to enter the website, you've got to have the correct username and password. It could be that you would never enter the website. So that would be a pretest loop. So here's an example where it would never enter the loop. If number is set to 6, 6 is not less than or equal to 5, so it would never output hello. We also want to watch out for something called infinite loops, which is a loop that will just never stop. And this typically happens if you forget to change the value so that it makes the loop stop. So here's an example here where we set number to 1. 1 is less than 5, so it outputs hello, but we don't increment number, so number just stays at 1. So we go up here, number's 1, output hello, number's 1, output hello, and it just outputs hello forever until eventually times out and you get an error. So this is an infinite loop. So here are some examples on using our while loop to validate our data. So validation, data validation. Input validation is the process of inspecting data that is given to the program as input and determining whether it is valid. The while loop can be used to create input routines that reject invalid data. and repeat until valid data is entered. Just like our example of a username and password. So here's the general approach. We ask the user to enter something and we read that item that they enter. We check to see if it's valid. If the input is invalid, then we give them an error and we ask them to enter again. We go back up. If it's invalid again, we give them an error message and we ask them to enter it again. So you got to ask them to enter it here. You got to read the input at the top. Check to see if it's invalid. If it's invalid, you got to read the input again. So you have to read the input in 2 spots. This is the important thing of checking using this loop. Okay. Here's an example. We ask the user to enter a number less than 10. Let's say that they enter the number 5. Is 5 greater than or equal to 10? No. So this is a number that's less than 10. It's a good number. So it doesn't go in here. It just bypasses this whole section of code because it's a valid number. So it would just keep going and keep going with your program. But let's say you enter a 20 or an 11. 20 or 11 are greater than, they're greater than 10. Even if I enter a 10, 10 is equal to 10. We need a number less than 10. So it would say, no, that's an invalid number. You've got to enter a number less than 10. And then it would ask you to enter the number again. Now, let's say you enter the number 5. It would check, is the number 5 greater than or equal to 10? It is not greater than or equal to 10. So it would just, boom, go back out here and exit and keep going with the program. So just what to remember about this is you got to ask for the data twice. You ask for the data here, you check. If it's invalid, ask for the data again. Okay. Here's how the flow chart looks. Read the value first, check. Is it invalid? Yes. Display error message, read again, read another value, check. Okay. If you don't read again, it's just going to be an infinite loop because you're checking the same value over and over again. In this example, it says get the number of players per team. How many players do you wish per team? And then it will ask you to enter the players. So there is a min number of players and there's a max number of players. So if let's say that the min number of players is 5, you can not have a team with less than 5. The min could be 5. And then you would decide what max is. Let's say that you decide that max is 10 and you don't want to have any more than 10 players. So if the team players is less than min players or max players, then we're going to give them an error and say you should have at least 5 players, but no more than 10 players. How many players do you wish per team? Let's say you enter 15. It would check, is 15 less than 5? No, but is it greater than 10? Yes. It would give them an error here. Now, once you actually have the right number of players, let's say you have 6 players, then it skips all this and it goes to the rest of the code. And it says how many players are available. So let's say that you have a team of 6. And 5 are available. So it would say, while 5 is less than or equal to 0, please enter 0 or greater. So let's say that so here we want to make sure that if we're checking to see that this is not we're wanting to make sure that it's not less than or equal to 0. So we're just checking that they're not entering a negative number. That's all it's checking there. So if they enter a negative number, then it's going to ask them to enter 0 or greater. Okay, and the last thing I want to show in this particular video with the while loops is the counters. So in a while loop, we can count to control our variable. So a counter is a variable that is incremented or decremented each time the loop goes around. It can be used to control the execution of the loop, also known as a loop control variable. And it has to be initialized before you enter the loop. Here is one example. So we have, remember, const means it's a variable that you cannot change in the program. So it's a constant and you can't ever assign a new value to it. So our constants are min number and max number. 1 and 10. We create a counter called num. So this is going to count. And this counter is going to start at 1. So num equals 1. While 1 is less than or equal to max number, if you remember, was 10. So here, let's see if I can get my pen. Letting you right. Okay. So we here at 1, while 1 is less than or equal to 10, we're going to print 1, and we're going to print 1 times 1. And then we're going to increment this number to 2. So num will be 1, the num will be 2, the num will be 3. And every time we increment num, we just want to make sure that we stop at 10. And so this is all it's doing. It knows that it wants to go, here's num here. It wants to go from 1 to 10, this variable. And it wants to output num and then num squared. So 1 times 1, num becomes 2, 2 times 2 is 4, num becomes 3, num becomes 3 here, 3 is less than or equal to 10, we print out 3, 3 times 3 is 9, so on and so forth. So here we're using num as a increment. It's helping us to get to our numbers from 1 to 10 and looking at the number squared. You can do this, you can say num plus plus, but you could also, if you wanted to, you could see the num squared of just the even numbers. So if you wanted to do just the even numbers from 1 to 10 and not do the 3, the 5, the 7, and the 9, and the 1, because 1 is not an even number, then you could start at 2. So num could start at 2 here. And then this would print 4. And then instead of adding just 1 to it, you could say num plus equals 2, or num equals num plus 2. So let me just show you how to do that. So we have int num. We would start num at 2. And then we would say while num is less than or equal to 10, see out num. So this will see out the 2. And then I'm going to put some spacing in there. And I'm going to see out num squared, which is num times num. Oops. And then end line. ENDL, so that each one shows on each separate line. Now, if I do this and I do nothing else, I'm going to get an infinite loop. So this will be an infinite loop, and num will always be 2, doesn't ever change. Let's just take a look real quick. Make this smaller. Run it. So looking here at the bottom, it just prints 2, 4, and it just keeps going forever. And I'm going to make it stop because it will go on forever. Then now I'm going to add my counter. So I'm going to add num equals num plus 2. And I'm going to run it again. So looking here at the bottom, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So I'm looking at the square of the even numbers. Another way that I can do this, and I think I had shown you this before, I can't remember, and I may not have come up in your book yet, is I can say num plus equals 2. So this is the same thing as num equals num plus 2. Just a shortcut. So it gives you the same output. And basically what it's doing is it's saying, okay, take num and add. So the addition sign comes first. So you're adding 2 to num. And then the equal sign says, hey, assign it back to num. Now make num a 4. Okay, so just a shortcut. Okay, so in the next video, we'll talk about the do-while loop, which is another kind of loop that we can use in C++. You can go ahead and get started on your readings and make sure that you complete your exercise for this chapter.